It was the first day of the new semester, and the students were buzzing with excitement as they made their way to the biology classroom. The school, located on a space station orbiting a distant planet, was unique in that it hosted a diverse group of students from all across the galaxy. There were humans, of course, but also a wide variety of alien species, each bringing their own culture, history, and biology to the classroom. Today, however, was particularly special. The students had been told they were going to have a new teacher. The biology class was one of the most anticipated classes, not just because of the subject matter, but because it was taught by someone who understood both human and alien biology. The rumors about the new teacher had been swirling for weeks. Some students whispered that she was a brilliant scientist. Others claimed she had lived on multiple planets and studied many species. But none of that mattered as much as what the male students were talking about. They were excited and nervous at the same time, eager to see what the teacher would be like, especially since she was an alien herself. As the bell rang, signaling the start of the lesson, the students filed into the classroom. The walls were lined with holographic displays and interactive models of alien anatomy. Some human, some from other species. The room smelled faintly of the synthetic air conditioning, and the soft hum of the station's systems could be heard in the background. The human students found their seats, trying to hide their nervous energy. The class was going to be different today, that was certain. Then, the door to the classroom slid open, and in walked the new teacher. She was tall, with smooth purple skin that shimmered slightly under the lights. Her eyes were a soft, glowing blue, and her hair, if you could call it that, was a cascade of shimmering fibers that seemed to float around her head. She wore a simple yet elegant uniform that was both functional and mysterious, and as she stepped into the room, every student's eyes were on her. The students had been expecting someone unusual, but this was different. The male students in particular couldn't help but stare. Her presence was unlike anything they had ever experienced. There was a certain grace about her that made her seem both regal and approachable at the same time. It was hard to look away, but at the same time, they couldn't help but feel a bit nervous. The teacher smiled warmly, her expression kind but with a hint of amusement in her eyes as she surveyed the room. "Welcome, students," she said, her voice smooth and melodic, carrying an unmistakable authority. "I am Professor Zira, and I will be teaching you about the fascinating world of biology. In this class, you will learn not just about human anatomy, but also about the many different species that populate our galaxy." She paused for a moment, allowing her words to sink in. Some of the students, particularly the human boys, exchanged glances. They had heard that she was an expert in both human and alien biology, but hearing it from her made it feel even more real. This was going to be unlike any class they had ever taken before. "Today," Professor Zira continued, "we will start by looking at something very special. I'm sure some of you have heard of the many different kinds of life forms in our galaxy, but nothing compares to the complexity and wonder of the creatures who share this universe with us. As part of today's lesson, I will be showing you the biological features of my species. It may be a bit unexpected for some of you, but I trust you'll all be open-minded enough to understand the science behind it." The students listened attentively. The human boys were intrigued, but also a little nervous. What exactly did she mean by unexpected? They couldn't help but wonder what was going to happen next. Was she going to reveal something strange, something they weren't prepared for? Their imaginations ran wild for a moment, but they quickly reminded themselves that they were in a school, not a space carnival. Whatever it was, it had to be educational. Professor Zira moved toward the front of the room, where a large holographic display awaited her command. She pressed a button on her wrist, and the display flickered to life, showing a 3D model of an alien body. The alien was a mix of strange, otherworldly features. Its body was covered in scales that shimmered with different colors, and its eyes were larger than any human's, with intricate patterns swirling inside them. The human students leaned in closer, fascinated by the level of detail. "This," said Professor Zira, "is a model of my species. As you can see, we are quite different from humans, But our biology is no less complex or impressive. Each species has evolved in its own way, adapting to the environment it comes from. She explained the alien's anatomy, highlighting how the species' unique features allowed them to thrive in their harsh homeworld's conditions. The human students were captivated, some in awe and others in mild surprise. They hadn't expected such a detailed look into the biology of an alien being. But what truly caught their attention was how comfortable and confident Professor Zira was. She wasn't just a teacher. She was a living, breathing example of the alien world they had only heard about in stories, and that made them eager to learn more. As the lesson continued, the male students found themselves increasingly curious about her species, their initial nerves fading into excitement. This wasn't just biology class. It was a journey into the unknown, one that was going to challenge everything they thought they knew about life in the universe. But little did they know, the true shock was still to come. As the students sat in their seats, eager yet uncertain about what would come next, Professor Zira began her lesson. The holographic display still hovered in front of her, showing the alien model she had introduced earlier. The students were mesmerized by the intricate details of the alien anatomy, but they couldn't help but wonder what would come next. Professor Zira had promised something unexpected, and their curiosity was reaching its peak. With a calm smile, she adjusted the display and clicked a button on her wrist. The hologram shifted, showing a completely different model. This time, it was a close-up of the alien's internal organs. The male students blinked in surprise, not expecting such an up-close view. They had seen diagrams of human anatomy before, but this was something entirely different. Professor Zira began speaking, her voice clear and steady, as though this were the most natural thing in the world. As you can see, our anatomy is quite different from that of humans. For example, our circulatory system operates using a fluid that is not blood, but a special compound that helps regulate our body temperature. This is vital for survival in the extremely hot climates of our homeworld. The male students exchanged looks, their interest growing with every word. They weren't just learning about biology now. They were learning about an entirely different way of life. Each new piece of information seemed more fascinating than the last, and they found themselves leaning forward, eager to hear more. The thought of encountering life forms so unlike themselves was both humbling and thrilling. Next, Professor Zira said, "I want to show you how our limbs work. As you can see, we have 3 primary limbs that we use for walking and handling objects. This adaptation allowed our ancestors to survive in environments with thick vegetation and dangerous terrain. The extra limb provides balance and allows for greater control over our surroundings." She demonstrated by making a few movements with her own arms, showing how her species' limbs worked with fluid grace. The students were intrigued. Some of the boys even whispered to one another, commenting on how different yet efficient the alien body seemed. It wasn't just different, it was remarkable. As she continued, she explained more about her species' vision. "Our eyes are not like yours," she said. "We see a wider spectrum of light, including ultraviolet and infrared. This helps us detect heat signatures and navigate in environments where sight alone would not be enough." The male students couldn't help but imagine how amazing it would be to see the world through those eyes. They could only wonder how different their own world would look if they had such abilities. They had never considered that there were species out there who could perceive more of the world than they could. To them, it was eye-opening, literally and figuratively. But Professor Zira wasn't finished yet. She tapped a few buttons on the console in front of her, and the display changed again. This time, it showed a 3D model of her species' reproductive system. The male students went quiet, their curiosity mixing with a hint of nervousness. They had expected to learn about organs and systems, but this was different. This was personal. Professor Zira noticed the change in the atmosphere. The students seemed to grow tense, unsure of how to react. She gave a small, reassuring smile before continuing. "I understand this may be uncomfortable for some of you, but it's essential to understand the full scope of biology. if we are to truly appreciate the diversity of life in the galaxy. Our reproductive system, while not like yours, is just another example of how species adapt to their environments. She explained how her species' reproductive process was tied to the environment they lived in, how it allowed them to survive in harsh climates, and how their biology was shaped by the planet they called home. The male students listened intently, but the nervousness was still there, hovering in the background. Some of the students were fascinated, but others struggled to hide their discomfort. It was clear that the male students, in particular, weren't used to seeing such detailed and personal biological information about another species. They had grown up with certain taboos, certain boundaries that were never crossed in their education. But Professor Zero was showing them that those boundaries didn't apply when it came to the study of life. Professor Zero didn't seem bothered by the reaction. She had taught many different species, and she understood that there would always be some initial discomfort. But she also knew that true learning often required pushing past that discomfort and opening one's mind to the unfamiliar. "Remember," she said with a gentle tone, "biology is not just about the organs or the systems. It's about understanding the diversity of life and the many ways evolution has shaped each species. The more we learn, the more we realize how connected we all are. Even if our biology is different, we all share the same goal: survival, adaptation, and growth." The students were silent for a moment, contemplating her words. Slowly, the tension in the room began to dissipate. The male students, though still processing the information, found themselves reassured by her calm and logical approach. They were beginning to understand that learning about alien biology wasn't about shock value. It was about appreciating the incredible variety of life in the universe. As the lesson continued, the students, especially the human boys, found themselves more and more intrigued by Professor Zero's teachings. She had shown them that biology wasn't something to fear or feel uncomfortable about. It was something to explore with curiosity, open minds, and respect. And in that moment, they realized they were on the verge of understanding something far greater than they had ever imagined. The room had settled into a strange sense of calm. The initial shock of seeing such intimate details of an alien's biology had begun to wear off, and the students were now focused on the lesson at hand. Professor Zira had proven to be more than just an exceptional teacher. She was a guide to a universe they hadn't even begun to understand. With the lesson still in full swing, she moved on to discuss a more delicate topic: the differences in how various species communicate. It wasn't just about words. It was about how bodies, sounds, and even light signals could convey meaning. For example, Professor Zira began, "Our species communicates not just through speech, but also through color changes in our skin. These colors can represent emotions, ideas, and even warnings. Our ability to change colors is tied to our environment and our social structure. It's an immediate and powerful form of communication that has evolved over time." The male students, particularly the humans, leaned forward in interest. They had heard about nonverbal communication before, but this was something entirely different. Professor Zira's calm demeanor as she discussed the complexities of her species' communication made it seem all the more fascinating. She had just opened their eyes to a completely new way of interacting with the world. Some of the boys found themselves comparing it to their own limited ability to communicate without words, something as simple as a look, a gesture, or a nod. But what Professor Zira was describing was far beyond anything they had ever known. Her species could convey emotions instantly, without needing to say a word. One of the students, Mike, couldn't help but ask, "How do you know what each color means? Is there a specific language, like for humans?" Professor Zira smiled, pleased by the question. "Yes, just like you have words to express your thoughts, we have colors that represent specific emotions or ideas. These colors are taught from a young age, so we learn to read each other's signals just as you learn to speak your language. It's as natural as breathing for us." The room went quiet as the students took in this new information. Some of them were imagining a world where they didn't need to speak to communicate, where everything was conveyed through sight and color. It was hard for the human students to imagine living like that, but the idea seemed both simple and extraordinary. Professor Zira then continued with another part of her lesson. Now let's discuss how evolution affects our perception of the world. For example, our hearing is much more sensitive than yours. We can hear sounds in a broader range of frequencies. This allows us to pick up on subtle shifts in our environment that you might miss. This sparked a new line of thought among the students. Mike, who had always been fascinated by animals and their unique abilities, asked, "So you can hear things we can't? Like, maybe things from far away?" "Exactly," Professor Zira replied. "We can hear frequencies that help us understand our surroundings, even in complete darkness. Our planet has very little natural light, so this sense is crucial for survival. It allows us to navigate in ways you might find impossible." The male students were wide-eyed now, each imagining what it would be like to hear things they couldn't even detect. They had grown up knowing the limitations of their own senses, but now they were learning about a species that had developed new, more acute abilities to survive. As Professor Zira moved on to the next part of the lesson, she revealed something even more startling. She brought up a 3D model of the nervous system. This time, instead of the usual mapping of nerve pathways, it showed an alien nervous system that was vastly different from anything human students had studied before. "This is where our biology diverges the most from yours," she said. "Our nervous system has an extra layer of protection. We can regenerate neurons that would be permanently damaged in humans. This allows us to recover from injuries that would be catastrophic for your species." The students stared at the hologram, trying to understand how something so advanced could exist. The idea that a species could heal itself from injuries that humans couldn't recover from was both awe-inspiring and intimidating. One of the students, Tom, raised his hand and asked, "So, does that mean you can survive injuries that would normally kill us?" Professor Zira nodded. "In some cases, yes. Our regenerative abilities are linked to our biology and the harsh environments we evolved in. While humans might suffer from permanent damage to nerves and other organs, we can heal in ways that might seem impossible to you." This revelation took the students by surprise. The human boys were no strangers to the dangers of combat, accidents, or injuries, but the idea of a species that could heal such devastating wounds was something they hadn't even considered. It made them feel both small and incredibly curious. What would it be like to live in a world where injury didn't necessarily mean permanent damage? As Professor Zira continued her explanation, the male students couldn't help but feel a deep respect for her species' resilience and adaptability. They were starting to realize just how little they truly knew about life in the galaxy. They had always thought of themselves as advanced, but now they were learning that there were beings far older, far more capable, and far more diverse than they had ever imagined. For the first time, they felt like they were only scratching the surface of the vast and incredible world around them. And that, more than anything, was what made this lesson so unforgettable. It wasn't just biology they were learning. It was the entire universe, unfolding before their eyes. The class had now moved into one of the most thrilling parts of the lesson. Professor Zira had captured the full attention of the students, and their curiosity was at an all-time high. After discussing the alien anatomy in great detail, she was now ready to share something far more mysterious, something that would test their understanding of the universe. Professor Zira began speaking, her voice calm and measured. "Now that you have a better understanding of how my species' biology functions, let's move on to a more profound topic, the question of evolution across the universe. Our development is not limited to just our physical form, but extends into how we adapt to different environments and the technology we create to survive." The students sat up straighter, sensing that this was going to be another groundbreaking lesson. Human students, especially the boys, were fascinated by the idea that the species of the galaxy could evolve not only biologically, but also technologically. They had learned a little about the aliens' regenerative abilities and their highly developed senses, but now it seemed like they were about to dive into something even deeper. "As you know," Professor Zira continued, Life on Earth has evolved over millions of years in response to the planet's specific conditions. Similarly, life on my planet and other worlds has adapted in ways you might never imagine. The holographic display flickered and changed once more, this time showing a map of several different planets. Each one was marked with a symbol that represented different types of life forms, from the most basic microbial organisms to highly advanced sentient beings. The key to evolution is not just survival, she said, but the ability to shape your surroundings and find ways to live in even the harshest environments. Professor Zira pointed to a planet far from Earth. This is my homeworld, Zorath. It is a planet of extremes. Extreme heat, limited water, and shifting landscapes. The native species, like my own, have adapted to this environment through biological and technological advancements that allow us to thrive. The students exchanged glances, trying to imagine a world so harsh and unforgiving. The idea of living in such extreme conditions made them appreciate the relative safety and comfort of their own planet even more. But it also made them eager to learn more about how such a society could thrive under such conditions. What about technology? Mike asked, his voice filled with curiosity. How has your species' technology helped you survive these conditions? Professor Zira smiled, obviously pleased by the question. That's where it gets even more fascinating. While our biological abilities have allowed us to adapt, our technology has also played a crucial role. We've created devices that can convert heat into energy, build structures capable of withstanding extreme temperatures, and even create sustainable sources of water from thin air. The boys couldn't hide their amazement. The idea of turning heat into energy, or creating water from almost nothing, was like something straight out of a science fiction novel. They had seen technology progress on Earth, but the possibilities Zira was describing seemed to go far beyond anything they could have imagined. I'm sure you've heard of renewable energy sources, such as solar power, she continued, but on my planet, we've taken it a step further. We can harness energy directly from our planet's core, a process that's as simple as tapping into the heat beneath our feet. The students were left speechless. The thought of using geothermal energy in such an advanced and efficient way seemed both incredible and intimidating. Some of them wondered if humans would ever reach such a level of understanding and innovation. I can only imagine how much effort it took to reach that point, Tom said, his mind racing with questions. How long did it take your species to get to that level? Professor Zira's eyes seemed to brighten as she answered. It took us thousands of years, much like your species. We made many mistakes, faced many challenges, but through determination, we eventually unlocked the secrets to thriving in our environment. It's a process that never stops. Technology evolves as quickly as our understanding of the world around us. For a moment, the room was silent. The human students were struck by the idea that the road to technological advancement wasn't smooth or easy. It took time, effort, and countless mistakes to get to where they were now. And yet, here was a species that had pushed through these obstacles to reach an unimaginable level of progress. Professor Zira, sensing the students' awe, spoke again. I want you to understand something very important. Technology is not just about machines or gadgets. It's about how we think, how we approach problems, and how we learn from each experience. Your species has already made great strides in space exploration, renewable energy, and communication. But there is always more to learn, more to discover. The students nodded, now even more motivated to pursue their studies and contribute to the advancement of human technology. They had always thought of themselves as part of a pioneering species, but they were now aware that there were many lessons to be learned from the galaxies around them. What's most exciting about all of this, Professor Zira concluded, is that you, as humans, have the potential to evolve and adapt in ways you haven't even begun to imagine. The future is wide open for you. The students sat back, their minds buzzing with the possibilities. They had just begun to realize how much they had to learn, not only about their own species, but about the universe as a whole. It was no longer just about biology or technology. It was about understanding the connections that linked them all. the infinite potential that lay in the stars. And with that realization, their journey of discovery had only just begun. As the lesson progressed, the students could hardly believe how much they were learning from Professor Zira. The mysteries of the universe, which had once seemed distant and unreachable, were now unfolding before their eyes. The boys were beginning to understand just how vast the world was, and how small they had once thought they were. Professor Zira had introduced them to the idea of universal evolution, but now she was moving into something even more mind-blowing: intelligence beyond just biological or technological means. She was about to explain the concept of advanced intelligence, something that stretched beyond the capabilities of machines or even biological evolution. "The next concept I want to discuss," Professor Zira began, her voice steady, "is something that many species struggle to understand: consciousness itself. What is it? What makes a species truly intelligent?" The room was silent. The students were on the edge of their seats, all of them eager to understand this concept. They had always thought of intelligence as something directly linked to problem-solving, or the ability to create tools, or the development of advanced technologies. But now, Professor Zira was challenging that idea. "Intelligence," she continued, "is not just about the ability to think or make decisions. True intelligence is about the capacity to understand the very nature of existence itself. It is the ability to perceive the world in a way that other species cannot even begin to imagine." The students blinked, unsure if they fully grasped what she was saying. To them, intelligence had always been about practical skills, something that could be measured through IQ tests or technological achievements. But Professor Zira was now talking about something deeper, something that reached into the very essence of what it meant to be aware. "Some species," she said, "have developed not only advanced technologies and regenerative abilities, but they've also unlocked a greater understanding of the universe. They can connect with the world around them in ways that seem almost mystical to others. Their intelligence doesn't just exist in their minds. It extends into their very being." The students were absorbing every word, and Mike raised his hand, hesitant but curious. "Professor, are you saying that some species can understand things in ways we can't even think about?" Professor Zira smiled gently. "Exactly. Imagine being able to perceive the energy around you, or being aware of the thoughts and emotions of others without them saying a word. Some species have reached that level of intelligence, and it allows them to transcend the limitations of traditional thinking." The students looked at each other, fascinated. They had never considered intelligence in such a broad, almost spiritual way. The idea that some species could have access to abilities far beyond their own made their achievements seem small in comparison. But it also sparked something else, an immense curiosity. Could humans ever reach such a level of understanding? Could they one day tap into something beyond the conventional? "I know this may sound impossible to you," Professor Zira added, "but it's very much a part of the universe. Some of the most advanced species in the galaxy don't use technology the way you might think. Instead, they use their minds, their consciousness, to manipulate their surroundings and even communicate across vast distances." A hushed awe settled over the room. The students had read about telepathy and telekinesis in science fiction books, but to hear that such abilities were possible in real life left them stunned. They had never imagined that consciousness itself could become a tool, one that could shape reality itself. "So," Tom said slowly, "are you saying that there are beings out there who can communicate without speaking, just by thinking?" Professor Zira nodded. "Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. And some species, like the Elreth, can even send thoughts across galaxies. The idea of distance becomes irrelevant to them. They have transcended physical limitations." The boys exchanged wide-eyed looks. They had always believed that space travel and communication across galaxies were beyond their reach, but now they were learning that some species had mastered it, not through advanced technology, but through the power of their minds. As if to further illustrate her point, Professor Zira activated a new display in the air above them. It showed a diagram of interconnected minds, a network of consciousness spanning a galaxy. The image was almost beautiful, depicting what seemed like threads of energy connecting sentient beings from distant parts of the universe. This network is known as the Eldara link, she explained. It's a natural extension of advanced intelligence. Some species, like the Elreth, have learned how to connect their minds to each other, sharing knowledge, thoughts, and experiences. It's a form of collective consciousness. The students were captivated by the diagram, their minds racing with the possibilities. It felt like the universe had just opened up in front of them, revealing secrets they could never have imagined. So, if humans could reach that level of understanding, Mike asked, his voice filled with wonder, what could we accomplish? Professor Zira smiled warmly, her eyes full of wisdom. The potential is endless. It's not about technology or tools. It's about how you see the world and how you choose to grow. You, as humans, are just beginning your journey. You are filled with untapped potential. For the first time in the lesson, the students felt something powerful stir inside them, a sense of hope, a sense of purpose. They had always believed that their intelligence, their technology, would carry them forward. But now they realized that the key to true progress wasn't just about machines or inventions. It was about their minds, their thoughts, and how they connected with the universe. And with that realization, they knew one thing for certain. The journey of discovery had only just begun. The students were quiet for a moment, reflecting on everything Professor Zira had shared. Their minds were filled with new ideas and concepts that seemed to push the boundaries of everything they had ever known. For the first time, they could feel the weight of the universe pressing down on them, and it didn't feel overwhelming. It felt like an invitation to discover more. Professor Zira had just opened their eyes to the power of consciousness, and it had sparked a burning curiosity in them all. The idea that intelligence could go beyond physical capabilities and stretch into the very fabric of reality itself was something they had never imagined. Now, they wanted to know more. They wanted to understand how far human potential could really reach. As the lesson came to a close, Professor Zira gave them one last thought to ponder. Remember, she said, her voice calm but full of meaning, true intelligence isn't just about what you know. It's about your ability to learn, to grow, and to adapt. You, as humans, are at the beginning of your journey. You have the potential to explore the universe in ways no one has ever seen before. The possibilities are limitless. The students nodded, feeling inspired. For the first time, they realized that they weren't just students in a classroom. They were part of something much bigger, something far more exciting than they had ever imagined. Mike, who had been the most skeptical at first, felt a fire ignite within him. He had always thought of science as something grounded in facts and proof, but now he understood that science was also about exploring the unknown, pushing past the boundaries of what was considered possible. What they were learning was not just knowledge. It was a new way of seeing the universe. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the class, the students slowly gathered their things. But there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. No one was in a hurry to leave. It wasn't just the lesson itself that had captivated them. It was the possibilities it opened up for their future. They knew that something had changed within them. Tom, who had always been curious about space, was the first to speak as the class began to empty out. Professor Zira, he called out, "Do you really think humans could one day reach that level of consciousness? Could we be like the Elreth or the other species?" Professor Zira smiled, her eyes filled with the same wisdom that had captivated them throughout the lesson. "Yes, Tom, I truly believe that you can, but it will require patience, perseverance, and a deep understanding of yourselves and the world around you. It's not something that happens overnight, but it is possible." The students left the classroom with a renewed sense of purpose. They were no longer just learning for the sake of passing exams. They were learning for the sake of discovering something greater, something that would shape their future in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. Mike and Tom walked together, deep in thought. "Do you think we're ready for this?" Mike asked. Tom shrugged. "I don't know, but I think we can be. I think humanity has the potential to do things no one has ever dreamed of." Their conversation continued as they made their way down the hallway, their voices filled with excitement and possibility. They had always thought of science as something rooted in facts and certainty, but now they saw it as something more, something alive, something waiting to be discovered. Back in the classroom, Professor Zira sat at her desk, watching her students leave. She had seen this spark before, in many species she had taught. It was the moment when students stopped thinking of themselves as limited by their biology and began to realize that the mind, the spirit, and the heart could break through those barriers. She knew that the human students were on the cusp of something extraordinary. The journey ahead for humanity would be difficult, but it was also full of promise. They would face challenges, just as every species did, but their potential was limitless. Professor Zira had no doubt that the future of humanity held incredible discoveries, innovations, and breakthroughs, and it would be exciting to see where their journey took them. In the coming days, the students continued to think about the lessons they had learned. Some began to read more about space exploration, others delved into the mysteries of consciousness, but all of them found themselves looking at the world differently. They understood now that the universe was not just a place to explore. It was a vast and connected system, full of infinite possibilities, waiting to be understood. For the first time, they saw themselves not just as humans, but as explorers of not only the stars, but also of their own minds. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were ready for the challenge. They had glimpsed the future, and they knew they were prepared to walk down the path that would lead them to greatness. And in the end, they realized that the greatest discoveries weren't just about technology or science. They were about understanding themselves and the endless potential that lay within each of them. The universe was vast, but their potential was even greater. As the weeks passed, the students found themselves increasingly drawn to the lessons taught by Professor Zira. The curiosity that had been sparked in them now became a driving force. They couldn't stop thinking about the universe, about the possibility of reaching beyond their current understanding. They were no longer just studying. They were questioning, exploring, and imagining the future. Each day, the classroom felt different. The students felt a sense of responsibility, as if they were not just absorbing information, but were becoming part of something much larger. They had learned about the vast intelligence of other species, the power of consciousness, and the deep connection that tied the universe together. But most importantly, they had learned that humanity's potential was just beginning to be realized. Mike, who had once been skeptical about the idea of humans reaching the level of the Elreth, was now a firm believer. His mind was filled with new possibilities, and every new discovery made him even more eager to learn. He spent hours reading about the theories Professor Zira had mentioned in class. He had even started practicing mindfulness techniques, hoping to understand the power of his own consciousness. He wasn't sure how it would help, but he knew it was the first step towards something greater. Tom, on the other hand, took a more practical approach. He spent his time learning about space exploration and the cutting-edge technologies that humanity had already developed. He was fascinated by the idea that humans could one day travel the stars, and he was determined to be a part of that journey. He understood that reaching for the stars wasn't just about technology. It was about mindset. It was about believing in the possibility of something beyond the ordinary. One day, as the students gathered for another lesson, Professor Zira stood before them with a new energy in her eyes. There was a sense of excitement in the air, and the students could feel it. She had something important to share. "I've been observing all of you closely over the past few weeks," she began, her voice warm yet serious. "And I must say, I'm impressed with how much you've grown. You've embraced the lessons, and you've begun to think in ways that most humans haven't even started to explore. But now it's time for you to take the next step." The room went quiet. Every student was listening intently, eager to know what came next. "I've always believed that the key to human potential lies not just in your mind, but in your heart," Professor Zira continued. "The mind can be trained, but the heart, your spirit, your curiosity, cannot be taught. It must come from within. And now, I want you to take what you've learned and see the world differently. I want you to find ways to unlock your full potential, not just as students, but as human beings who are capable of so much more. The students exchanged glances, unsure of what Professor Zira meant. What could they do next? How could they unlock more of their potential? Professor Zira smiled gently, sensing their uncertainty. You've already taken the first steps. You've started to think beyond the physical limitations of your world. You've begun to question everything, and that is the key to growth. But now, I want you to challenge yourselves. Start looking for the answers within yourselves. Ask the hard questions. Who are you? What is the purpose of your existence? What are you truly capable of? The students felt a stirring within them. These weren't just academic questions. These were the kinds of questions that could change their entire approach to life. They realized that the journey they were on wasn't just about understanding the universe. It was about understanding themselves. Professor Zira continued, her voice more passionate now. You have the potential to do incredible things. But in order to unlock that potential, you must be willing to look inward. You must trust in yourselves and in each other. The universe is vast, and you have so much to learn. But the most important thing is this. Never stop asking questions. Never stop seeking the truth. And never stop believing that you can reach higher than you ever imagined. With those words, the class came to a close. The students filed out of the room, their minds racing with the possibilities of what lay ahead. But this time, there was something different about the way they felt. They weren't just excited about learning. They were excited about the journey of self-discovery. For the first time, they understood that the greatest discoveries weren't just about the stars or the technologies they could create. The greatest discoveries were about understanding who they were, what they were capable of, and how they could shape their future. Mike and Tom walked side by side, their conversation full of energy. Do you think we can really do it? Mike asked, his voice filled with excitement. Tom nodded. I think we can. We just have to believe in ourselves and keep asking the hard questions. The future is ours to shape. And with that, they walked into a new era, one where they understood that the path to greatness wasn't just about knowledge. It was about the courage to push beyond what was known and to challenge everything they thought they understood about themselves and the universe. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were ready. And in the end, the greatest discovery of all was the realization that the universe had always been waiting for them to awaken to their true potential. The stars, and everything beyond them, were within their reach.